So in 2 seconds, you're gonna see on your screen 2 shots under the same lighting condition, same setup, shot with 2 different picture profiles. One is shot with S-Log3, the other one is shot with S-Cinetone. I want you to pause this video and drop your answer in the comment section below. So last week I made a post about S-Log3 versus S-Cinetone, which one is better and would you like to see a video? And most of the people went crazy. They were like, we would love to see a professional colorist point of view. And then there are people saying like, you have to expose it 2 stops over to get cleaner results. Nerd alert! This always cracks me up because these are the people that watch benchmark videos and think that they know everything, but then real world is not the same as benchmarks. Benchmarks always go out the window when professionals are at play. When creativity becomes a slave to the equipment, you're headed in the wrong direction. I was listening to a podcast by Deakins and the other cinematographer asked him that, hey, that one shot in Prisoners where Hugh Jackman's character is stuck in a ditch, and they're like, how did you light that scene? It looks so realistic. And Deakins goes, well, I shot it with the key fob light. That's the beauty of the digital cameras. Especially in my setup, it doesn't work. I'm grading here. I have this light running at all times. If I blast this light, it's gonna throw so much light on my image here that the results are gonna be crazy. I won't be able to grade. That's one. If I crank up my base ISO to 3200, all of a sudden these screens are gonna be blown out. It doesn't matter if it's S-Log or not. So now you guys are picking up what I'm putting down. Like, why is Log C from Alexa or RedLog gives you such clean image, but then S-Log3 can't do that? So it's not necessarily like, oh, there's a way to use S-Log3. S-Log Profile has some fundamental issues that Sony has to fix. The thing is, like, if you're shooting with their Venice, any camera that can record in RAW, then all that information after applying noise reduction comes right back. So you guys already saw the title of the video, so you know there's gonna be a clear winner. And it's not gonna be based on a general aspect, it's gonna be based on this specific scenario. And we're gonna rate both cameras in each category and then tally up the score. And then I'm gonna give my 2 cents at the end. I'm shooting with A7 IV and right now it's set to 800 ISO and it's showing 1 stop underexposed. I shot S-Log3 and S-Cinetone with the same settings. So now let's look at advantages and disadvantages for each camera in the current situation. We're at least shooting in the base ISO for S-Log3, but we are 1 stop underexposed. For S-Cinetone, we're 1 stop underexposed, so that's -1, and we're not shooting on the base ISO for S-Cinetone, which is 150 or 500, but we're shooting in 800. So there are 2 negatives going for S-Cinetone before we jump into this test. All right, so you know your boy is not into the nerd juice, but let's just look at the white paper from Sony. I want to look into like, why did they come up with S-Cinetone? They wanted to create something that goes from A to Z very easily and doesn't take that long, so perfect for wedding photographers, anybody who's doing run and gun. And let's look at these curves. So the tone curve, and they're doing a comparison between Rec 709, which is right here, R709, S709, which is Venice's S-Cinetone, and then S-Cinetone, which is for all the FX series and Alpha series. And if you look at that, look at the top end, okay? So this is your full range. Orange is your S-Cinetone. How much more room you have compared to Rec 709? It's absolutely insane. Or middle range, you still have tons and tons of room. Like, look at the difference. This is where it really shows how much better it is than Rec 709. I mean, just look at all this information that you can bring back, which by the way, we're gonna look at right after this. And then the bottom end is somewhat similar. And again, that's the beauty of it because it gets you off to a really, really fast start. And then this is the sauce, okay? So the dynamic range they're saying is definitely not S-Log3. It's the perfect balance between the dynamic range and the noise levels is good for high quality video images, which you will get to see here. All right, so we're inside Resolve now and check this out, okay? So look at the amount of information that's gone. This right now, let me bring up my notes. Nothing is applied to it. So this music video was shot in S-Cinetone. Look at this information. It's gone, right? It's totally gone. Like if it was shot on Rec 709, you have no information in the windows. Okay, drum rolls, because here's my grade. And once my grade loads up, look at everything. How everything got back. You can see the top in the waveform, how everything is protected perfectly. Like look at this image. So this is your, straight out of camera. And then this is what we were able to retain in post. That is something that you cannot do with Rec 709. And that's what I mean. A lot of people don't know how to handle S-Cinetone footage. They probably look at this and they go, this is garbage. I'm gonna go back to shooting S-Log 3. The rating system is gonna be based on bass, which is how fast can we get to the bass look. Number 2, natural color reproduction, skin tones, things like that. And number 3, push tolerance. How far can we push the footage before it starts breaking? Number 4, noise. How noisy is the signal? And how much work do we have to do to clean it up? And number 5, how long it takes us to get to the final result, time. Let's look at our screen. I'm gonna show you this shot first. And now I'm gonna go to this shot. So which one did you pick? Did you pick this one or this one? This guy right here, our profile A is Sony S-Log 3 and our profile B is S-Cinetone. Look at how close they're matched. That took a while and some surgical operation to get them in there, but we did. So let's start right here. Let's start with our first category, bass. Okay, so turn these off. I already mentioned that we were one stop underexposed. So it took 3 quick steps to get it to this point, our bass look, which was gamma. I just lifted that up, cranked up the saturation to 57.5, and then brought down the light to just make the contrast more gentle, because if I turn this off, you can see like the circles under my eyes and things like that. And if I bring it down, it just smooths everything out. So 3 quick steps to get there. Okay, now let's go to Sony and kill all of these and see how long it took. So I'm not even showing like the in and out because those are irrelevant. Like we're gonna convert our image from Rec 709 anyways. So the CSTs are not relevant for this result. And the first step here is to do this, which took 2 steps instead of 1. So we're using our gamma and gain. So instead of 1 step, which was just gamma, here we're using gamma and gain, and then the saturation we're cranking to 56, but we're not done. We had to go in our HDR palette and under our highlights, we had to lift this up, because if I punch in and show you this, if I do before and after, it's just a little mushy. You see like the highlights here? Like nothing is really happening. So I wanted to pull those out a little bit, okay? And then here, we're working on the contrast. So if I do before and after, it's just that this sort of contrast is very 2010, okay? If you look at anything that is epic, the contrast is just a little bit lifted. It's not touching the ground. It just doesn't look that good. And it doesn't have the same amount of juice. So I'm just bringing it up. And even if I take you right here in the hair area, and if I do before and after, it just brings out the detail. It does all the right things. And so basically it ended up taking us 5 steps to get the S-Log dialed in for bass, and it ended up taking us 3 steps for S-Cinetone to get here. So that is a +1 for S-Cinetone. S-Cinetone wins bass. Moving on to point number 2, which is natural color reproduction and skin tones. We didn't have to do anything. The colors, I'm looking with my own eyes from this light to here to the curtain. It looks exactly like this. Okay, so I didn't have to touch anything. I didn't have to move anything. You can just look at my offset. Nothing is being moved. Everything looks gorgeous. Whereas if I go to S-Cinelog or S-Log 3, because let's do this. Let's pull this up. So now we have that. And if I swipe this over, just look at what's happening here. You see this? It doesn't look blue. This does not look blue. This looks green. This looks exactly like what I see here in S-Cinetone. So S-Log you be lying. And it's doing the same thing with the skin tones. It's just making it a little bit more yellow than, this skin rendering, which is perfect, which is how my skin tone is. You're seeing the curtain in the back, same thing. It should be this green. It shouldn't be like this color. Okay. So that is not good. So then what I had to do is I had to go in here and mess around with my hue versus hue to dial that in. And now we're pretty close. If I swipe it back and forth, you can see like we got pretty freaking close. But that's not good enough. Why? Because if I'm not at a location, I wouldn't know if the colors are accurate or not. So most of the time when you're grading and they just send you the footage, you'll never know that it shouldn't be blue, it should be green, right? Or it should be teal. So that's very disappointing. So when it comes to color reproduction, I'm giving that one to S-Cinetone. We recently did a survey. Majority of you, regardless of the skill set, are struggling with shot matching, skin tones, balancing, and working with 8-bit footage. So I created a 1-hour-long free training that covers all of that. Plus, we'll wrap up the training with an extensive Q&A, and you'll also get a link to download the practice footage, power grades, and some of my personal LUTs. Moving on to push tolerance. I'm gonna hide this and we're gonna go back to S-Cinetone. And what I recommend you do too is don't just add saturation like here. You can for your base, you can crank that in. But when I was looking at this, I'm like, man, we can push it a little bit more. But when I was using global saturation, it just wasn't having it because we have this here, we have the chair here, we got this going on over there. So we got colors that are kind of pushed already. So when you do global saturation, they just get nuked. Okay, so instead what you want to do is right here. That's your sat versus sat. What does that mean? It starts from the lowest saturated areas all the way to most saturated areas. So look at my curve that I created. And if I do before and after, you can see in my vector scope what's happening. So it's popping this open in the midtones, like lower midtones and midtones, and it's leaving the top as is, like the saturated areas as is. Because if I were to right click and turn this off, just look at what happened to my reds. How they got look at this right here. Borderline clipping. Okay. So that's why I brought this down, and then bringing this up helped my skin tones. So if I punch in and show you, even like my eyes, it's popping it, it's not breaking anything. And look at how smooth the lines are in our vector scope. So it gets to tell you there's a lot of push and pull that could be done in here. Let's go see what's happening with our S-Log 3. So I'm going to go in here, exactly the same change, duped it. And I'm not happy with the way the vector scope looks. Look how crooked this is and how it's just like jaggedy and like doing some funny things. So this gets to tell you, and even if I push in, like the saturation, like around my lips right here is just a little bit more than how it should be. And it just kind of feels like that something is being applied compared to how clean this was. Okay. And if I just get really, really close to the skin tone, like you're not going to see any imperfection. Like look at how smooth it is through and through. Going back to that, it just has it's just a little rougher on the edges is what I'm seeing. So when it comes to push tolerance, I'm going to give it to S-Cinetone again for that reason. Moving on to our noise, all we had to do here, just 2 steps and we were done. Like after these 2 nodes, we didn't have to do anything. So let's just go here and look at how clean this is, right? It's going to look perfect. Even with compression on YouTube, it's not going to have artifacting or discoloration, posterization. Most of the time when you're applying noise reduction, there's still so much compression to your footage that it's looking kind of mushy. When you export it, when you upload it to YouTube, it just magnifies those imperfections. Whereas here, look at that. Nothing needed to be applied compared to, let's go and look at what's happening with our S-Log 3. And you can see how gunky this is. So this is S-Cinetone. This is S-Log 3. So of course we have to apply noise reduction. And here it is. It cleans it up quite a bit. But let me show you what's going down under the hood. First of all, I had to spend so much time getting this specific result. And a bunch of things are happening here, okay? So first of all, I changed my frames all the way to 5. So we can like go 5 frames forward and back and really get good sample for noise reduction. And then I set this from faster to better. And then I set that to default, which is medium. In here, I pushed my luma and chroma temporal threshold to 20. But the trick is this. If I were to kill this, double tap on it, see, it goes to 50. So the default is 50. You don't want to do that. Why? Because look at what happens. If I do before and after, you see how my face is moving and how it's just like making the face look so terrible. For this reason, I brought it back to 7. And as soon as I do that, look at what's happening. So things that are not in motion, that's what's getting cleaned up. And things that are in motion, it's kind of not bothering with that. So that's a very, very advanced tip that I can give you when you're using noise reduction, especially when you have a subject that's moving and you want to make sure that it just doesn't get too mushy. And quite frankly, like, look at this. Like when I do this, it changes the shape of my face. So I don't want that. But that's not the end of it. So when I did that, what happened is if I punch in and if I do before and after, you see that it's still softened my eyes and it softened everything, because if we go here and we look at how sharp this image is and we go here and look at that, it softened it quite a bit and you'd be able to tell that difference. So then what I had to do is I had to go here and actually add sharpening. So if I do this, you can see like the detail in the eyes is coming back. And let me take you through like what's really happening here. Again, this is all advanced stuff. Okay, so I had to go in here, go to sharpening right here, then drop my radius to 0.40. And if I go under my highlights AB, it can tell you like what we're affecting. I had to go in my scaling, drop it down to 0.3. So we're just affecting like the edges, ears, eyes, stuff like that. And then if I get rid of it and come back and show you, we're getting detail in the eyes. And that took, again, a lot of trial and error, okay? So this and this, these two had to work in harmony. So this took a while to get that dialed in, but then we're not even done yet. Why? Because if I take you right here, now it's just like too clean compared to what's happening here. And I don't know how much I have to zoom in for you guys to see that. There is a lot of uniform grain, fine grain in S-Cinetone that we just don't have here. So like even cleaning all of that up, it just looks kind of mushy because it's compressed, it's not shot in RAW. So then in order to kind of make up for it, now I have to do a counter step, which is adding grain. So see, like now we're bringing in some fine grain and I'm just using Resolve's own film grain OFX. And I set it to 35mm 400T, and then I've made some changes. That's why it says advanced. So what I did is this. I came in here, I killed my highlights, I brought it all the way back. I brought my midtone back because grain in the midtone was looking pretty ugly on my face, because if I undo this, you can see how much grain it's adding. That's too much. So after doing that, bringing that down, we can actually just manually control where we want the noise to be, or grain to be in this case. So I went under my shadows and I cranked it up, because if I do before, it's here and it's not that much. But if I do after, we like really add a similar texture to what we see here. But again, it's very uniform and it doesn't have noise to begin with. So it's a lot cleaner, monochromatic compared to what we're seeing here, even after applying all the noise reduction. So all these things we have to keep in mind. So now you see how many different steps had to go in just to clean up noise, not to mention what it would do to your performance. So in that one, I have to give it to S-Cinetone. And finally, we're moving on to how long it took to do both of these looks. And let's go just look at it. Let's have our notes tell the story. So if I go here, that's all we had to do. In total, we had to take 4 steps to get this look. So basically all we did here is pull up my gamma, saturation, and bring down my light in HDR palette. And in here, I went in into my sat versus sat and just control my saturation. And 4 steps later, we ended up with our final look. As opposed to, we have this right here. I'm not even going to take you through the entire thing, but I'm just going to say it ended up taking 10 steps to get here. And they weren't easy steps. They were pretty chunky steps. In total, it took me around 3 minutes to get this S-Cinetone look. And it took me about 15 minutes, and I was going fast, to get the S-Log 3 look. So it's 5 times longer. In which case, we have to give this one, again, to S-Cinetone for time. I'm sorry to tell you guys, like, I'm not being biased. In this particular situation, I mentioned it earlier that our test is going to be based on this exact situation, not just some general test. So we can actually do apples to apples. I mean, it's 5-0. That's what we're looking at. I mean, you just saw, I broke it down for you. Let's do a quick pros and cons list. All right, so let's start with S-Cinetone. Natural color rendition, which is absolutely insane. Great reproduction, super fast to grade. You guys already saw, like just 2-3 steps were there. Image right out the gate, super clean, ridiculously clean. The exports are fast as hell. We don't have noise reduction, we don't have grain, we don't have any OFX. It's so freaking quick. Not to mention, another positive is that you can cook up a LUT and send it to your editors, whatever, if they're working in a different software, and you don't have to worry about staying in Resolve because you don't need to have noise reduction or grain or anything applied. And it doesn't require an expensive computer. That's another pro for the S-Cinetone because we're just doing the bare minimum to get to our end destination. Negatives are going to be limited for creative grading. So let's just say that you don't care about natural color reproduction and you just want to create something insane, right? And you want to just like go for a crazy push look. S-Log 3 will be your choice. So I'm not going to lie to you there. Another con is going to be strong default contrast compared to S-Log 3. So that's another thing, right? Like, yes, it's cool that it's giving us a quick starting point, but we kind of have to deconstruct what's already there, whereas S-Log is just a blank canvas. So you just go in and start having fun. Now let's look at the pros and cons for S-Log. So for S-Log, dynamic range, that's undeniable. Nobody's taken that away from S-Log Profile. Great for creative grading, once again, just especially if you're shooting during the day, whatever, and you just wanna, it's a boring day and you wanna make it interesting, you can do a lot with it. You know, again, you're starting with a blank canvas. Now we're just gonna jump straight into the cons. And guys, I'm not coming for it. I'm not trying to hate log. I'm a colorist. I want a blank canvas. If you don't agree with me, leave a comment below, but let's just go through these cons. So not the best color reproduction. You saw the natural colors, whether it was a skin tone or like what it did to like the teals and the blues, completely off. It takes 5 times longer. It literally took 5 times longer to grade. The image is super noisy in the shadows and lower mids. The exports are crazy slow because we have so many OFX applied just to kind of put a band-aid on like things that just shouldn't be like that to begin with. And then it requires expensive system because if you don't have a $20,000 machine that can just handle noise reduction, grain, and all those other OFX, sharpening effect, and then play it in real time, you'll be screwed, especially when you're doing a session with a client. And most importantly, it is Resolve dependent. For me, I have editors, I can't even use S-Log 3 if I want to, because most of the time they're either using Premiere Pro, Final Cut 10, whatever it is. Some of them are using Resolve. So when I'm handing it off, the footage to them, I'm not doing any work on it. I'm just giving them the LUT that I created and I say, apply that. Do I want to live with that noisy image? So if we were to take the effects that do not get translated with the LUT, I don't want to have a super noisy image as my final. So then S-Log or S-Cinetone is my only option. So now I want to look at some use cases, right, for each one. So for S-Cinetone, I'm going to say, if you're working with small budget, quick turnaround, you're not crazy experienced with grading, and if you have to hand off the footage to be edited in a different software than Resolve, S-Cinetone, no questions asked, okay? S-Log 3, use cases, big budget, normal turnaround where you can actually take your time, have fun with it. For experienced colorist or post people, just like, you know, you need to know what you're doing, especially with S-Log 3. And then finally, it's resolve specific. You will need to apply anything specific, Premiere specific. If you're great in Premiere, what I'm saying is that you can't just switch it, because again, we can't export a LUT with noise reduction, grain, and all sharpening and all those things applied, to it. So we have to be married to whatever software we build the look in. All right, so here's my verdict. If you're using an Alpha series camera, I would say without a doubt, go with S-Cinetone. You're gonna have so much fun and the results are gonna be so close to what you want without any hassle, without the extra work, extra steps. If you're using FX9 that records in RAW or Venice or something like that, absolutely go shoot in S-Log3. If you're doing a narrative or a music video or something like that, you can use S-Log3, knock yourself out. What I do want to know is, have you guys played around with these two profiles and what's your experience like and which one is your go-to? That's it, guys. Love you guys. Until next time.